They went back to the cottage. They went back to the cottage, and I have not been okay since the moment that scene started playing on my screen. My jaw was on the floor, my hands were shaking, and I had to pause the episode just to take a breath and collect myself because what just happened felt like everything this season has been quietly building toward, and it finally paid off. If you thought episode 2 had you on the edge of your seat, episode 3 just walked in, pulled the chair out from under you, and let you fall completely. I went into this episode thinking I was ready. I had my snacks, I had my blanket, I had my theories all lined up neat and tidy. And within the first 20 minutes, Bridgerton looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Absolutely not. Forget everything you thought you knew. We are doing something far more beautiful and far more painful than you expected." So if you are a Bridgerton fan, if you have been following this season, or if you just love watching someone completely lose their mind over a period drama, you are in exactly the right place. Stay with me because we are breaking down every single moment of episode 3, and trust me, there is a lot to talk about. Asterisk before we even get into the magic of episode 3. We need to talk about where episode 2 left us, because that ending set up everything that happens here and honestly deserves its own moment of appreciation. Episode 2 closed on a note of pure, delicious tension. Our two leads were in a situation where feelings were clearly sitting right there, just underneath the surface, begging to come out, but neither one of them was ready to say the thing that needed to be said. And that is what makes this show so good at what it does. It does not rush. It lets the tension breathe. It lets you sit in the discomfort of two people who clearly want to be in each other's orbit, but have every reason in the world to keep their distance. So going into episode 3, the question was simple. How long can they keep pretending? How long before something cracks? And the answer, my friends, is not very long at all. Episode 3 opens with this gorgeous, quiet energy that feels almost deceptively calm. The kind of calm that a really good story gives you right before it pulls the rug out. The costumes in the opening scenes are stunning soft tones, careful details, and the show uses that visual softness to mirror exactly where the characters emotionally are. They are trying to stay composed. They are trying to hold everything together on the outside. But you can feel it. You can feel the whole episode quietly tightening, like something is coiling up and getting ready to spring. The supporting characters in these early scenes are doing a lot of heavy lifting too, and I think that is something people do not always give this show enough credit for. The side conversations, the knowing looks between other characters, the little moments happening in the background, all of it is feeding into the central story without ever taking attention away from it. It is layered writing, and episode 3 does it really well from the very first scene. Asterisk here is the thing about Bridgerton that separates it from every other period drama sitting in your watch list right now. It understands that the most romantic thing two people can do is not kiss. It is not the grand gesture or the dramatic confession. It is the moment right before all of that, the moment where two people are standing close enough to feel the weight of everything unspoken between them, and neither one moves. Episode 3 is basically a masterclass in that exact feeling. And the middle section of this episode is where that energy reaches a point where you are physically gripping whatever is closest to you. There is a scene, and if you have watched Episode 3, you already know exactly which one I am talking about, where the conversation between our leads shifts. It starts as something completely ordinary. Normal words. Safe words. The kind of words people use when they are trying to talk about everything except the actual thing. And then something changes. You cannot pinpoint the exact second it happens, but suddenly the air in the scene feels completely different. The way the camera sits on their faces, the way the dialogue slows down just slightly, the way one of them says something that sounds casual but carries the weight of a full confession underneath it. That is the moment this episode stops being good and starts being something you are going to remember for a long time. What I love most about how the writers handled this shift is that they trusted the audience. They did not underline it. They did not put a dramatic music sting behind it to tell you how to feel. They just let it happen naturally and quietly and trusted that you were paying close enough attention to catch it. And that kind of storytelling respect for the viewer is genuinely rare. Most shows would have overplayed that moment. Bridgerton let it breathe, and because of that it hit 10 times harder than it would have otherwise. The supporting characters are also doing something really interesting in this section of the episode. While our leads are navigating this slow emotional earthquake between them, everyone around them is moving in ways that are quietly closing the doors on any easy escape route. Every little social obligation, every side conversation, every well-meaning interference from the people closest to them is pushing our two leads toward a situation where they are going to have very few options left except to face what is actually happening between them. It is like watching someone very gently and very deliberately corner to people who absolutely do not want to admit they have been cornered. And it is so satisfying to watch unfold, because by the time you reach the back half of this episode, you realize that every single scene in this middle section was a stepping stone leading to one place. One very specific, very emotional, absolutely iconic place, the cottage. But we are not there yet, and the journey getting there is just as worth talking about as the destination itself. Asterisk. Nobody warns you about the specific kind of emotional damage that Bridgerton is capable of delivering in under 3 minutes of screen time. Nobody sits you down and says, hey, there is going to be a scene in episode 3 that is going to reach directly into your chest and rearrange something in there. Nobody tells you to prepare. And I think that is intentional. Because if you saw it coming, it would not hit the way it does. The crack happens quietly. That is the part that gets me every single time I replay it. We have spent 2 episodes watching these two people build walls, maintain distance, and convince themselves and everyone around them that whatever this thing is between them, it is manageable. It is containable. It is something they can keep in a box and put on a shelf and walk away from whenever they choose. Episode 3 is the episode where that box falls off the shelf and everything inside it spills out onto the floor in front of both of them, and suddenly, there is no version of this where they can pretend they did not see it. The scene that breaks everything open does not start dramatically. That is what makes it so powerful. It starts with something almost frustratingly small, a moment of vulnerability that one of them did not mean to show, a slip. The kind of thing you say when your guard is down for just 1 second too long and the words come out before your brain has had the chance to stop them. And the other person catches it. They catch it and they do not look away. And in that pause, that single, breathing, devastating pause, this entire season snaps into focus. Everything that felt like slow build and careful patience suddenly makes complete sense, because this is what it was all leading to. This exact second. This exact crack in the wall. What the actors do in this scene deserves every award conversation happening right now, because there is no big acting happening here. No tears streaming down faces, no raised voices, no theatrical breakdown. It is all incredibly still and incredibly small, and that is exactly why it destroys you. The eyes, the slight change in posture. The way one of them exhales like they have been holding that breath since the very first episode. It is the kind of performing that makes you forget you are watching a show at all. You feel like you accidentally walked into something deeply private and real, and you almost feel guilty for witnessing it, but you absolutely cannot look away. And then the episode does something genuinely bold. Right at the peak of that cracked open moment, when you are sitting there completely convinced that this is it. This is the scene where everything finally gets said out loud. It pulls back. Not in a cheap cliffhanger way. Not in a frustrating, manipulative way. It pulls back in the way that real life actually works. Something interrupts. The world does not stop for feelings, even feelings this big, and that interruption lands like a cold splash of water on both the characters and everyone watching at home. Because now they have to carry that moment forward. They cannot unknow what just almost happened between them. And neither can we. By the time this section of the episode closes out, you are not watching to people who might have feelings for each other anymore. You are watching to people who know. And that changes absolutely everything about what comes next. Some places carry a feeling that regular places just do not have. A specific chair in your grandmother's house. A street corner from your childhood. A room where something important happened to you once and now every time you think about it your chest does something complicated. The cottage in Bridgerton Season 4 has become that kind of place. And Episode 3 understood that completely. It did not just bring our leads back to the cottage. It brought them back carrying everything that has happened since the last time they were there, every held breath, every word they swallowed, and it let all of that walk through that door with them. That is not just good television. That is genuinely beautiful storytelling. The second that location appears on screen, something shifts in the atmosphere of the entire episode. It is like the show itself exhales. Everything that has been wound tight across 3 episodes, all that careful tension, all that deliberate distance, suddenly has somewhere to land. The cottage is not just a setting. The writers have made it a character in its own right. It is the one place that exists outside the rules, outside the social performance and the expectations and the careful presentation that both of these people maintain in every other space they occupy. When they are at the cottage, the armor comes off, and Episode 3 uses that established feeling with so much intelligence that by the time the scene fully opens up, you are already emotional before a single important word has even been spoken. What happens inside that cottage scene is something I have genuinely been turning over in my mind since the moment the episode ended. On the surface, it looks like a conversation. 2 people talking. Nothing wildly dramatic happening in the traditional sense. No sudden rainfall kiss, no sweeping orchestral swell pushing you toward a feeling. Just 2 people in a room finally occupying the same emotional space at the same time for what feels like the very first time. And the writing in this scene is so sharp and so careful that every single line is doing double work. What they say on top and what they actually mean underneath are 2 completely different conversations happening simultaneously, and you can hear both of them clearly if you are listening the right way. That kind of layered dialogue writing is genuinely difficult to pull off, and this episode makes it look effortless. There is one specific exchange in the cottage scene that I cannot stop thinking about. It is not the loudest moment. It is not the most visually dramatic beat. It is actually one of the quietest things in the entire episode. Just a few sentences, a look, a silence that stretches just long enough to mean something. But in that small quiet moment, the entire emotional journey of these 2 characters across this season gets compressed into something you can actually feel sitting in your body. That is the magic trick this show pulls off when it is operating at its very best. It takes something enormous and makes it feel intimate. It takes something that has been building for weeks and delivers it in a way that feels both completely surprising and absolutely inevitable at the exact same time. And that right there is why this cottage scene is going to live in the Bridgerton conversation for a long time. Not because it was the loudest or the most dramatic moment this season has given us, but because it was the most honest one. 2 people, 1 room. No more walls. And everything that needed to be said finally finding its way out into the open air between them. By the time that scene fades out and the episode begins moving toward its closing moments, you are sitting there feeling something that is equal parts joy and devastation. Because the best romantic storytelling always makes you feel both at once. It makes you happy that it happened and already a little heartbroken knowing that nothing this perfect can stay simple for very long. Episode 3 earned every single one of those feelings. And I, for one, am not even close to being over it. Asterisk, let me just say this clearly and without any hesitation before I get into anything else. Episode 3 of Bridgerton Season 4 is the kind of episode that reminds you exactly why you fell in love with this show in the first place. Not the costumes, not the sets, not the gossip and the drama, although all of that is obviously incredible. But the feeling, that specific warm and slightly painful feeling you get when a story is being told with genuine care and genuine intention, and you can feel that care coming through the screen. Episode 3 gave me that feeling start to finish, and that is not something I take lightly when I am sitting down to rate an episode. So the rating. I have thought about this more than I probably should have. I went back and forth between two numbers for longer than I am willing to admit out loud. But I am landing on a 9.5 out of 10 for episode 3, and I am standing firmly in that decision. The only reason it is not a perfect 10 is because there is one storyline running alongside the main plot that felt slightly rushed in this episode. Like the writers needed it to move faster than it naturally wanted to, and you could feel that friction just slightly in a couple of scenes. But everything else, flawless. The pacing, the performances, the writing. The cottage scene that we have already spent a significant amount of time discussing, all of it was operating at the absolute top of what this show is capable of delivering. Now the hot takes. And I mean genuinely hot, because I have seen some of the conversations happening in the comments sections and on social media, and I think there are a few things people are either sleeping on or completely misreading about this episode. Hot take number 1, the interruption scene that we talked about earlier in this video is not a bad writing choice. I have seen people online calling it frustrating and saying it felt cheap, and I completely disagree. That interruption is one of the smartest decisions the writers made in this entire episode, because it respects the weight of what was about to happen. It says this moment is too big to happen here in this setting, under these circumstances. It deserves better. And by delaying it, by making both characters carry that almost moment forward with them, the payoff when it does fully arrive lands with 10 times the emotional force it would have had otherwise. Frustrating in the moment. Absolutely. Bad writing. Not even close. Hot take number 2, and this one might actually upset some people. The supporting characters in Season 4 are quietly having one of the best ensemble runs this show has ever put together. I know the main love story is getting all the attention right now, and rightfully so. But if you take a step back and look at what the people around our leads are doing this season, it is genuinely impressive. Every single supporting character has a clear point of view, a clear motivation, and a clear way that they are pushing the central story forward without ever feeling like they exist purely to serve the plot. That is hard to write. That takes real craft. And episode 3 is probably the best example of that ensemble work paying off in a way that elevates the whole episode. Hot take number 3, this season is pacing itself better than any previous Bridgerton season, and I will absolutely die on that hill. People want everything immediately, and I understand that impulse completely, because when you are invested in a story, you want to live inside the good moments as fast as possible. But the slow build of Season 4 is doing something really important. It is making you earn the feeling. Every emotional payoff hits harder because you have been waiting for it. The cottage scene would not have destroyed us the way it did if we had not spent 2.5 episodes watching these two people carefully and painfully. Avoid exactly that kind of honesty with each other. Now predictions for episode 4. Because after everything episode 3 just did to us, we need to talk about where this is all going. My biggest prediction is that the fallout from the cottage scene is not going to look the way we expect it to. I do not think we are getting a clean, happy, everything is resolved moment right away. This show loves to let its characters sit in a complicated middle space, the place where something important has happened and both people know it, but neither one quite knows what to do with it yet. I think episode 4 is going to live in that space for a while, and honestly, I think that is the right call. Let it be complicated. Let it be messy. Real feelings between real people are never clean and straightforward, and the best thing this show can do is honor that truth. I am also predicting that at least one of the supporting storylines is going to take a sharp and unexpected turn in episode, but that changes the landscape of the social world our leads are operating in. There have been small things building quietly in the background across these first 3 episodes, little moments, careful setups, and episode 4 feels like the point where some of those setups are going to start paying off in ways that directly affect the central relationship. Watch the background characters carefully. Watch the conversations happening at the edges of scenes. This show plants things early and pays them off later, and I have a feeling Episode 4 is going to be a payoff episode in more ways than one. The one thing I am dreading going into Episode 4 is an outside interference moment, someone stepping into the space between our leads, right when things are finally starting to open up and creating a complication that sets everything back. Because this show will absolutely do that. It has done it before and it will do it again, and even though I know it is good storytelling, it never stops being painful to watch in real time.